Welcome to the Pewtercast. I'm Brent Allen, your host. Today is September 6th, 2016. This is episode 10, the initial 53. It's game week, Bucs fans. It is finally here. No more stupid preseason that doesn't count anymore. No more stupid camps and no more stupid anything else that doesn't matter, because you know what? The season is here. It matters. It counts. And guess what? Roberto Aguayo about to have his very first kick in the NFL. All of these players are about to really suit up, and this is where things happen. This is where things start to count, and it feels so good to be here, doesn't it, Bucs fans? I got to tell you, to me, and I don't know about to you guys. I don't know about to you guys who have been just kind of watching the preseason like you normally do. Maybe you check in every once in a while, see what's happening. You watch a game till maybe about halftime, then you turn it off because you're getting bored, because it's a preseason game. It really doesn't matter. And, for you guys, maybe this preseason has been just a regular preseason. But for me, and here I am in my very first year of broadcasting here with the Pewtercast. I was paying way closer attention than any normal human being who has, normal human being responsibilities should have. But man, this feels just like the longest preseason in the history of the NFL. I don't think I realized that camp goes on for a bloomin' month. In the NFL. I don't think I understood that at all until this year. And it probably just because I was watching it closer than I ever have before. But holy cow. Oh my gosh. Now, hey, listen, Pewtercast fans, it has been a couple of weeks since we were last together for a full episode. But in between there, we had a couple of these instant cast preview episodes that we put out there. So what'd you guys think? Did you like them? Did you like those episodes? I thought they were kind of fun. Well, apparently you did, because, we had set a goal. We had set a goal, as this is a new podcast. We're trying to get the word out, get the buzz going. We said, hey, listen, let's get 25 iTunes reviews that come in. And if they do, then we're going to add this instant cast show for the entire season. We're going to kind of unlock it. And so we gave you a couple previews of what that was. Apparently you guys got in there, you heard it, you liked what you heard, and you guys flocked to iTunes over the last week and a half. And we have had over 11 iTunes reviews come in just that short amount of time. And if you're keeping track based on what we've said in other episodes, that officially unlocks the instant cast for the entire season. We've hit our 25 goal. So guys, thank you so much for making that happen. I really, really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. And if you've not left an iTunes review yet, go ahead and go do it. You don't have to stop. We can blow 25 out of the water. We can go to 30, maybe 35, maybe 50. Let's get there. I think we can do that by the end of the season. Ooh, we should come up with something to do if we get 50 by the end of the season. That'd be fun. We'll think on that. Put a pin in it. But for right now, guys, we have a lot of iTunes reviews to read. But no, I'm not going to read them all right now, because that would just be ridiculous. So here's what we're going to do, guys. Thank you so much to everyone who sent those in. And yes, I'm going to read them. We're going to get them on air. It's just I'm going to do a few at a time over the next bunch of weeks as we go in through these main episodes. All right. That way we'll just kind of break it up. And I'm going to take them in the order that they came. So the first one I'm going to read today is from Dual Threat 18. He says, or she says, Brent is a great host who really knows what he's talking about. He can be critical without being cynical. His passion really shines, and he has a face and a voice for radio. Just kidding on the face. As a big-time consumer of podcasts, I can say that this is one of the best, not only of the Bucs, but of sports in general. Well, thank you so much, Dual Threat 18. And you know what? I really like that line. He can be critical without being cynical. I think I may steal that. I don't know that I ever would have come up with that on my own. I don't know. Maybe I would have. It's possible. Probably not. You get credit for it, Dual Threat 18. But I'm going to take it. I'm going to use that. I like that. Critical without being cynical. And hey, thanks for your support. Thanks for the kind words. I really, really appreciate that. And you're right. You're not really kidding. I do have a face for radio. That is absolutely right. All right, next one is from Fun So Far, Love Star Wars, who says, love the show, great content, keep up the good work. You know what I like about that one? It's short, it's sweet, it's simple, it's to the point, and most of all, it still counts as an iTunes review. Thank you so much so far. Fun So Far, Love Star Wars. Hey, if you particularly have not listened to episode number 1, the draft review, We recorded that on Star Wars Day, May the 4th, and we talked about that just a little bit. Actually, I think the title of that particular episode was The Phantom Draft Pick, because it was, episode 1, The Phantom. Yeah, you get it. You're there. You understand. You see what I did there. All right, one more iTunes review that I want to read before getting out of this section for today is from a guy named Max Vasher. Max says, "Who cares if the Bucs get little to no national attention? We've got the Pewtercast. Excellent reviews and news about the Bucs. So glad to have found this podcast. We are being blessed this year by several good podcasts that focus on the Bucs, and this one is top notch." Well, thank you, Max. I really appreciate that, and I feel blessed being named as one of the top-notch podcasts in the plethora that have really come out, because, hey, if you guys haven't noticed this summer, you have gotten a lot of Bucs podcasts to choose from, which has been really great. I've loved seeing that. When we first started back at the beginning of this summer, actually it was towards the end of last spring, our very first episode was right after the draft. There was 2. Just 2. That's it. There was 2. There was 3. One of them went away. He kind of, took some time to be with his family, which I completely understand. Pour one out for homie Chris. And, hey, listen, there was 2, which was not enough. I said that. I've said it many times. That's not enough. We need more podcasts about the Bucs. So I came in, and then over the course of the summer, Greg Allman from Tampa Bay Times, he's jumped in with the Locked on Bucs podcast. And listen, fans, if you're not listening to that one, jump over there, like his stuff, leave him a review, follow him on Twitter. You can follow him at Greg Allman, or the podcast at Locked on Bucs. That is a daily podcast. It comes out Monday through Friday. It's real short, about 20, 30 minutes. You can listen to it on your drive into work. And I'll tell you this. That podcast, Locked on Bucs with Greg Allman, is exactly what the official Tampa Bay podcast wishes it was. It is fantastic. It gives you exactly what you're looking for in terms of Bucs news that is really right up to the minute. You don't have to wait a week. It's there every day. Let's hear what else is there. Hey, listen, JoeBucksFan.com, they have several that they've been putting out, and several more coming. I don't know what they've got going over there at Joe Bucks Fan headquarters, but it sounds like it's pretty good. They're exploding over there, so glad to see that for them. Go listen to them. There's definitely still What the Buck. That's Derek Fournier. That's old school. He is kind of the godfather of Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcasting. Make sure you're listening to him. There's another new one out, Bucs and Brews, and I got to tell you guys, I am so thankful for these guys. Ben from over at Bucs and Brews is actually going to be in our inaugural Pewtercast Fantasy Football League, which is very fun. But hey, these guys are breaking down games in a way that I don't have to. I love what they're doing. They're breaking down games better than I ever could have. So make sure you're listening to them. I think they're a really great companion piece to what we're doing here at the Pewtercast. Though we're not really that connected except for our love of the Buccaneers and honestly Brews as well. So yeah, guys, make sure you go checking all that out. But hey, listen, you didn't come here to listen to me talk about other Buccaneers podcasts. You came here to listen to this podcast at the Pewtercast. And I've got one more thank you to say before we move on with the show. I've got one more thing to say. There are several people who have supported this show monetarily. And just in the last couple weeks, they've gone to paypal.me/the Pewtercast, and they have donated actual physical dollars to help keep the show going. Now listen, podcasts are free to listen to, and they should be. And as far as our content goes, it'll always be free. But they are not free to produce. And so I am super, super thankful for Nick Citro, M.O. Bamecki, who is all the way from over in the UK, and to Brett Polk, and I apologize if I mispronounced any of your names, but to Nick, Mo, and Brett, those are guys who have stepped up. They've donated money to the show. And, on our last episode, I had said, hey, listen, if everyone who downloads the show on a weekly basis were to do a one-time donation of $1, the show would be fully funded for the first year. It's actually like a year and a half. And, and here's the thing. I know not everybody can or will donate, and that's okay. It's really okay. So, if a 10th of you did a one-time donation of, I don't know, $10, see what I did there? The show is fully funded for a year and a half. Now, guys, I'm not sitting here trying to pressure you into giving me a bunch of money. That's not what this is about. But if you would like to be a part of that and support the show in that way to make sure that we keep coming back week after week after week and maybe even come back for a second season, we just don't end at this season, you can help me out in that way. And it's really easy. You just go to paypal.me/thepewtercast. Any amount is appreciated. Any amount. And hey, listen, if you're overseas like Mo, then you can still donate. Don't worry. PayPal will do the currency exchange for you. It's great. Okay, enough of that. Let's take a look at this episode for today, shall we? There's been a ton that has happened since episode number 9. We've had a couple of preseason games. We've had an initial cut to 75. We've had a secondary cut to 53. We've signed a practice squad. One of our people was signed by another team and then released by that team. We've brought in a couple people to work out. So guys, tons to talk about. And so all of that said, we are going to focus this episode on the roster. In particular, that initial 53. That's where we're going to go with this particular episode. We're looking at the roster. And since so much has happened, we're going to forego our usual top 5 segment that we would have in the middle so that we can actually talk about the cuts and the practice squad and that initial 53. Now, don't worry, we'll be back with it next week. And we are also still going to take our break. We're not just going to have a marathon episode today. We'll take our break so we can catch our breath. And then we're going to close out the show with a very familiar segment that we have now, because I've got some stuff to talk to you as one fan to other fans. So we're bringing back a segment called Fan to Fan. All that's coming to you today on the Pewtercast, fans. Stay tuned. Welcome back, Bucs fans. Today for our main segment, we're going to be taking a look at the initial 53-man roster, plus the practice squad. Now, you keep hearing me call it the initial 53, and I mentioned this on the last instant cast. Here's the thing. I hear a lot of people saying, oh, we've got down to the final 53. It's the final 53. No, it's not the final 53. You want to know why? Because the 53 is still going to change. In fact, since they announced that initial 53, it's already changed. They've already brought a new person in. They've cut another person. It's going to continue to change. This is just the initial 53. So that's why I'm calling it initial. It's just the first 53. This 53 is it's gonna be in flux for several weeks, even through the beginning of the season, until it really settles down and we get into what that 53-man roster is going to be for the majority of the season. So that's just where we are now. There's lots of moves to still come. But I thought before we got into talking about the actual 53, we had to talk about some of the roster cuts because we haven't really gotten a chance to do that. Now, something I wanted to point out, and I thought this was a great point. Bruce Allen, who is the president of the Redskins, mentioned this during the game, during the Redskins game. We had a couple of, couple of days ago now, I guess. Maybe a week ago by the time you're listening to this. But I thought it was real interesting. He said, they were down to the 75. He said, really, we've only got to cut 12 men. We don't have to get all the way to 53. We've only got to get to 63 because we've got those 10 guys in the practice squad that we want to bring back as well. And I thought that was real insightful. I'd never considered it that way. We were only really cutting 12. There's 10 that we're going to have to kind of let go through waivers and see if anybody else takes them. We'll take a risk on them, and then we'll bring them back if nobody else takes them. So they were really trying to cut 12 people. They kept the 53. They kept the 10. So let's go ahead and just talk about those 12. Let's get it out of our system. And the very first one I have to talk about is the big one, which is Danny Vitale. Danny Vitale was our draft pick. I think he was, sixth round? And he was cut. Now, I personally believe that Danny Vitale was cut and intended to come back to the practice squad, but he got claimed by the Bills. And that's part of the risk you take when you cut somebody intending to bring them back to the practice squad. And, the Bills then turned around. They gave him a medical exam, and apparently the Bills are a really touchy organization when it comes to their medical exams. And I don't mean touchy like weird touchy. I just mean little things they tend to blow up and make it bigger than it really is. And they saw something in his shoulder, and so he failed his medical exam, and the Bills wound up releasing him. So he's currently a free agent. I believe he'll be back. I really do. Now, I don't know if it's going to be once the injury takes care of itself, but I think he's going to be back with Tampa Bay. I really do. Now, a guy named Alan Cross made the team over Vitale, and the only reason that I can see right now that Alan Cross is on the team and Danny isn't is due to this injury. And it's possible not. Maybe Alan Cross really impressed the coaches. I don't know. I wasn't there, but in my mind, that's what I'm going with. It is just Vitale got cut and sent through the waiver wire, because of this little bit of an injury that he really had, which apparently the Bucs just thought it was like a sprain, and the Bills think it's like a full-on tear. So I don't know. Danny Vitale's out there. I've seen him lifting some weights since then, some real heavy weights, and I don't know how you can do that if you've got a tear in your labrum. But I think he'll be back as the injury heals, maybe even before then. Another cut. This one surprised me a little bit too. Luke Rhodes, who was the presumptive backup for Quan. And now listen, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but truth be told, if Quan comes out of the game for whatever reason, Darryl Smith is going to slide over as the new Mike linebacker, and then Darryl Smith's backup, Devontae Bond, is going to step in for him. And now here's the deal. We also already have two other linebackers on the practice squad. Now, I liked him better than either of those guys, but those other two guys are the guys that they kept. So, I can really understand why they might have cut Luke Rhodes, just given position battles, but or given position, I don't know, what do you call that? Saturation. We didn't need a specific backup for Quan, given that we had Darryl Smith who could slide over should something happen there. So yeah, I don't know. He's gone. He did not get signed to the practice squad. Jeremiah George also got cut and not signed back to the practice squad. And I don't think he was ever intended for the practice squad. And no one else picked him up. And he's a guy who's been cut and then re-signed and then cut and then re-signed and cut and re-signed by our team for a very long time. And here's the truth. We've got a lot invested in him over the years, but at some point you've either got to roll with what you got, or you got to stop and cut your losses and begin to work with somebody new who may develop into a permanent roster spot. And it just seems to me that maybe the Bucs had finally decided it was time to make that call on Jeremiah George. I'm sure he's a fine player in his own right, but he's never been good enough to actually make the roster and stay on the roster when everybody's healthy. So, I could see them going with other people for the practice squad to try to develop into somebody who may stay on the roster a little bit more long-term than that. Jonathan Krause got cut and not signed to the practice squad. And I got to tell you guys, I was rooting for this guy. I really was, but he just didn't make enough of an impact, and I absolutely agree with this decision. Now, was he better than Freddie Martino, who they did keep on practice squad? I don't know. I can't really say that, but I will say this. After this, the Bucs went out and signed Jeremy Butler from the outside, and he was the only outside signing for a reason. He's the only person that was not in Bucs training camp that they signed to the practice squad. And, with him as a wide receiver, I think we'll probably see him get promoted, and probably somebody else from the active roster getting dropped to the practice squad, and then that'll just push Freddie Martino out. Earlier today, we heard that the Bucs were working out Cecil Shorts, who came over from I think he's maybe bounced around. I don't know. Earlier today, they were working out Cecil Shorts, and then he actually did get signed to the active roster, and they waived Evan Spencer. Now, that's one of those, they had to waive him. He has to go through waiver claims before they can sign him to the practice squad. But I would expect if he clears waiver claims, we may see him added back to the practice squad, and we'll see Freddie Martino dropped. That's just an anticipation, but I don't think we're going to see Jonathan Krause come back onto this to this practice squad. So that could happen. Courtney Brown was cut again. He's another guy who keeps getting cut and brought back and cut and brought back, and it's like he's the guy that they call when injuries happen to your main guys and to your backups, and then you bring Courtney Brown in. So I don't know. We'll see what happens there. Kenny Bell was cut, and here's what I gotta say about that. I think we all love the theory of a great Kenny Bell player, but what we saw for him, we were all rooting for him. But I think we were all kind of understanding that what we were seeing now is who Kenny Bell really is. He's a guy that you put him in shorts and a t-shirt and he gets out there and he looks great. And when you put the pads on, not so much. I don't know what changes under that, but and we didn't get a chance to see much of that last year where he got placed on IR. And I think this year he didn't get placed on IR, so we could actually see what he was doing, and that's just what happened. He just didn't make the cut. Bernard Reedy, Dante Dye were both waived injured. Kenny Bell was actually waived injured as well. And I got to tell you, I hope to see both Reedy and Dante Dye back when they get healthy, especially Dante Dye. I really hope no other team snatch him up while he's out there getting mended up. There were a few others who got cut, but those are kind of the main ones I wanted to talk about because that's just the cuts. Those are basically, I'm talking about people who are no longer with our team. So let's move on from there. And let's get into the practice squad, guys. Although I got to tell you, we've really kind of started talking a lot about them already. I think this is an interesting group because this is what we call like the official practice squad. And then keep in mind, there's the 53 men on the active roster, but teams can only dress like 46 for game day, which means there's like 7 spots on the active roster that are basically just practice squad positions too. The only difference is that other teams can't touch those 7, but other teams can touch the 10. Anyone on a practice squad can be signed to an active roster from another team. But I think it was Greg Allman who said on his Locked On Bucs podcast, maybe even today, there's kind of like this gentleman's agreement between players and organizations that if you're on a practice squad and you get an offer from another organization, you at least tell the organization you're with now to see if they can match that or if they'll just let you go. So, there is definitely a benefit to keeping those guys on the payroll, so to speak. And so here's what I thought I'd do. I thought I would rank our practice squad, the 10-man practice squad right now, in order of importance as I see it. And so I'm going to read these names, and this is how important they are to the organization, how important their position is to the organization. Not necessarily if they're the best player on the roster, though that certainly will be matched up there. So here's the 10-man roster. I think the most important person on the 10-man practice squad roster right now is Jeremy Butler. I talked about him just a little bit. I think he's just hanging here until he learns the offense and gets a few practices under his belt. They didn't even bring him in for a workout. They just signed him. And I think once he does that, he'll get promoted. I think maybe Evan Spencer will, I was going to say maybe Evan Spencer would come down to make room, but he already came down to make room for Cecil Shorts, who is now on the active roster with Tampa Bay. I think in order to make room for Jeremy Butler, we're not going to see another wide receiver get let go because the only other wide receiver is either going to be at that point Adam Humphries, who's our number 3. That's probably not happening. Or Russell Shepard, who is a team captain and a special teams specialist who just happens to be listed as a wide receiver. So I don't see that happening. So a couple other places they could get from. They've got an extra tight end on the team that they could cut that could probably go somewhere in there. They've got some room with offensive line guys that they could cut. They've got some room with where else? They've got some room in some other places. Places that they've kind of beefed up a little bit that they could come from. I don't think we're going to see another wide receiver get cut in order to put Jeremy Butler up. Now, if they do put Jeremy Butler up, that will give them 5 active wide receivers. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I think he's an interesting person. And to be fair to you guys out there, I wrote this before Cecil Shorts got signed this afternoon. So it's possible this one doesn't really matter anymore, but for right now, I'm still putting him up there at the top. Number 2 person that I have on the practice squad in terms of importance to the team right now is Josh Allen, who's an offensive line. He's the guy who stepped in for Kevin Pamphile during the Browns game, and we didn't even notice. Didn't even phase us. We just, oh, look, there's another guy right there. Well, I guess people are getting through. Nope, they didn't. The offensive line looked great in that game for the entire half that the first team was out there. I thought they looked great, and Josh Allen was a part of that. I understand why they cut him when you look at the rest of the people that are on the offensive line on the active roster. But he really gives us some depth, and I think we'll keep him and see what he can do. He could challenge like a Caleb Benenoch, and he might even knock on the door of Kevin Pamphile just a little bit. I'm not sure. But we could see what he'll do. And certainly if Sweezy never really makes it off the PUP list, we've got him there, which will be great as well. Third on the list that I have for the practice squad is our running back, Peyton Barber. Which basically, here's the deal, guys. He's going to hang out on practice squad, and provided he doesn't get signed away by another team, if something happens to Doug, Chuck, or Mike, he'll get moved up right away. Period. That's what he's there for. He's a good running back. We don't need 4 on the roster because here's the truth. Mike James is not going to see that much playing time anyway. He's barely going to see any playing time, but he is our number 3. And I agree with this call. I agree that he is our number 3, and Peyton Barber very much has earned a practice squad spot. And I wish that we could keep 4 on the active roster, and that would be him. But for right now, that's where he is. The next 2, truthfully, you could flip flop the next 2. Yeah, I could see him going either way. I really could. But the order I put him in is Micah Awe, who and Josh Keys. They're both linebackers. There's just not a lot of depth at that spot on the active roster. We've got 3 starters and 2 backups right now. And, I thought both Micah Alway and Josh Keys showed some promise in camp to keep working. They showed promise, and we want to keep working with them. So I think that's an important spot for them. Coming in at number 6 on the practice squad, I have our other running back, Russell Hansborough. He had a good camp. I liked what I saw out of Russell Hansborough. He's not ready yet. I don't think he's ready yet, but he could be with work. And I think that's why he's 100% on this practice squad. We want to keep seeing what he can do. We can keep seeing him develop, especially should something happen for injury's sake. Next on the list is Javian Elliott. Now, truthfully, we are pretty stacked at this position, and here's the deal. We're stacked on it, and number 7 on the list is Javian Elliott. He is a cornerback, and here's the thing, guys. We're pretty stacked at cornerback right now. We are really stacked, and that's why he's kind of lower on this list. I think he's a better player than some of the other people that are maybe higher on this list, but I think we're more solid at this particular position, which is why I've got him listed a little bit lower. But I don't know. We'll see what happens with him there. Isaiah Johnson, who is a safety, and I still believe that safety is our weakest position on the team as of right now. And Isaiah Johnson is here, but he's not a star. He is not, he could be serviceable in an injury situation until we can get a better safety on board, or maybe draft a better safety, which is something I think we address in the next draft. But him being on practice squad certainly gives him time to improve, and hey, he could become a star and prove us wrong. He really could, but that's just, I don't think he's a star, but it's our weakest position, so he's there. Ben Gottschalk is my number 9 person, and basically here's the deal. We have Holly, we have Evan Smith, we have Pamphile, we have Marpet, and we have Benenoch, all who are cross-trained over into the center position. I think our center position's pretty well covered. We've got depth there to protect Jameis, which is nice, and kudos to Jason Light for spending so many draft picks on linemen to protect our investment in Jameis Winston. So I think we're okay there. This is one that I don't understand. I feel like we could use this spot for somebody else on the practice squad. But I do think he is in there at number 9. And then my number 10 person in order of importance, as I would rank them, is Freddie Martino, who's a wide receiver. And for me, he's just at the bottom of this list due to talent level, not a need level. I do think we have a bigger need at wide receiver. Although Cecil Shorts makes that completely changed now. But I don't know. I think he's the one who's on the most on the bubble to clear out for the roster spots to be made. That's my assessment of the practice squad guys: Jeremy Butler, Josh Allen, Peyton Barber, Micah Alway, Josh Keys, Russell Hansborough, Javian Elliott, Isaiah Johnson, Ben Gottschalk, and Freddie Martino. All right, guys. Well, I'll tell you what. Hey, let's go ahead and take a break here at this spot because this would really be an unending segment otherwise. Now, if I've said something so far that you'd like to comment on, whether it's in some of the cuts that have been made or on the practice squad, go ahead and send them over to the pewtercast@gmail.com. You can just right now during the break, you can shoot me off an email, or you can shoot out a tweet to @thepewtercast, or you can hit me up on Facebook at facebook.com/thepewtercast. Guys, I'm going to take a break. You're going to take a break, and we'll come right back, and we're going to get into the actual 53-man roster. We'll be right back.
Hey, listen, real skinny, loud colored tinnies, body marked up like graffiti. I don't push a Maserati, Beamer, Benz, or Bentley, and yeah, I rode a foreign, and Nissan looking spiffy. Hey, go ahead and doubt us, but what you know about us? And we ain't gotta follow, then we took another route. No, we ain't blowing trees, bro. Open up my window. I see you popping tags, but you know that's why your end's low. I tried to tell them we was coming, gone, let us in. Why they hating like we all a bunch of hooligans? No gimmicks, spirit in my lyrics. Know when people hear it, they gon' love it, they gon' fear it. And it ain't how we flow, cause when we show up at our show, they say we going so hard in the paint, they can't wait for some more. But some others say we preachy, some closed-minded geechies, like we ain't heard of Marx, like a Nietzsche. Believe me. They don't know about us, they don't know about us. They don't know about us, they don't know about us. They don't know about us, they think we dumb, diddy dumb. But they gon' know about us. They gon' know about us. Hey, they gon' know about us. They gon' know about us. Oh, they gon' know about us. They gon' know about us. Oh, they gon' know about us. They gon' know about us. 622 plus, gon' add it up. Hey, that's a big problem. Call it calculus. Math on subtract, but continue.
Welcome back, Pewtercast fans. Brent Allen, your host here, and we are back for our main segment called The Initial 53, Part 2. In Part 1, we took a look at the cuts that we made real quick, and we just kind of flew through the practice squad. But now it's time to take a look at the official roster. This is the initial 53 people that have made the cut. And actually we have one small change that we'll talk about when we get to that particular spot. And like I said, this is normally the spot where we would do a top 5 segment, but we're going to forego that so we can spend a little bit of extra time during this episode focusing on the initial 53. Now, I figure it's probably best to look at these players who have stayed, not as individual players, but as units. And I'll tell you, these are likely to change. By the time you're listening to this, several moves could have been made between when you're listening to this and when I'm recording this. So if anything's out of date, just know that that's it. That's all it is, because we're in a season right now. We're in a time when things are going to be moving rather quickly with roster moves as new players come available on the waiver wire and players are getting cut from other teams, and maybe that guy's a better fit for our team, or we have a need here that guy can help fill that's better than anything else that we've got. So we could be seeing a lot of that there. Just know this. Here's what it's not, okay? It's not me speaking inaccurately, because I promise you, I would never say something here that I have not 100% vetted and isn't 100% true or verified. Never would I ever do that for you, my fans, nor would I ever misspeak at all. there would never be something that just accidentally flubbed out of my mouth. Never. So just know that's all it is. That, if anything's different, it's just because it changed since the time this was recorded. It's not me. Yeah, right. That's not the case. All right. So let's take a look at what is really probably the most important position that we have on the team. And it also happens to be the position with the absolute least surprises as far as what happened. We all knew it was going to be. It's the quarterback position. Jameis, Mike Glennon, and Ryan Griffin all make the initial 53. No surprises here, unless you were surprised that another team has not beat down our door to hand us their first and second round picks for the next 3 years in a row just to take Glennon off of our hands. More on that later. But there's just no surprises. So they're all there. Jameis, Griffin, and Glennon are there. Running back position, let's move over there. We've got Doug Martin, of course, Chuck Sims, and Mike James. Again, no surprises here. This is a full complement of running backs. We don't need to have 4 running backs. That's why Peyton Barber's not on the active roster. Okay. And here's the deal. Mike James will barely see any playing time at all. I think I mentioned that earlier, unless there's an injury. And if there is an injury, you better believe, if somebody's going on a PUP list or an IR or something like that, Sims is getting promoted. Mike James will get promoted, and then Peyton Barber will be on the active roster before you can blink. That will absolutely happen. Or it could be Russell Hansborough if Russell Hansborough outplays Peyton Barber during practices. But here's what I'll tell you guys. I believe that Mike James showed up in the Browns game and showed why he is head and shoulders above the 2 guys we have on the practice squad. I think those guys are good, but they're not as good as Mike James. Mike James deserves this. He's been in this role for years. He knows this offense. He knows these teams. He knows where he plays, and he knows how to get in there and just be the next man up, and he is ready for that. So, and of course, Doug and Chuck are number 1 and number 2. All right. Here's a position we've already had some changes at. So let's take a look at it. This is wide receiver. Of course, we had Vincent Jackson, Mike Evans, and Adam Humphries, who came in at the 1, 2, and 3 spots respectively. And of course, there's no surprises there at all. Russell Shepard comes in as a wide receiver, but truthfully, he's more of a special teams guy. He was going to make this team no matter what. And by the way, he is the special teams captain. I got to be honest with you guys. I suspect that if you could just list somebody as a special team player instead of a wide receiver, Russell Shepard would be listed as that. He's not really going to be a wide receiver unless everybody just gets hurt. And then we might see him out there. But Shep's going to be on the team. The one who did make it on the team that maybe we weren't quite ready to see yet was Evan Spencer. Now, he'd made the initial 53-man roster. The Bucs have brought in Jeremy Butler, and he is currently on the practice squad. He's probably gunning. It looked like he was gunning for that Evan Spencer spot until we brought in Cecil Shorts earlier today. Actually, as I'm recording this, we brought in Cecil Shorts, and as of this evening, they signed him and they waived Evan Spencer. So Evan Spencer is no longer on the initial 53. I'm not even sure I can call it the initial 53 because now it's changed. It's the second 53. What do you think about that? I'm not going to go there. Anyway, so it's Cecil Shorts actually who is there now, and he is definitely going to be that number 4 wide receiver in the games. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with Jeremy Butler now. It'll really do that. I do think that Evan Spencer is better than Freddie Martino. There's a reason he was on the active roster as opposed to being on the practice squad. And I think should Evan Spencer clear waivers, we will see him back on the practice squad and us having waived Freddie Martino. I think Spencer was one of those, he was one of those 7 like unofficial practice squad players that I was talking about. I like him. I think he's fodder for trades and roster moves. And that's exactly what he was, he's there for that roster move spot. And that's what happened. So, but yeah, so VJax, Mike Evans, Adam Humphries, now Cecil Shorts are our wide receivers, and Russell Shepard is also there as a wide receiver, but really he's our special teams guy. Tight ends. Let's look at tight ends. Of course, we've got Cam Brate, who was listed as our number 1 throughout camp. We have ASJ, Luke Stockert. None of those are surprises. Perhaps the 2 biggest surprises, we actually wound up keeping 5 tight ends. And in that is Brandon Myers and Alan Cross to round up those 5. Now, Myers is back. He knows the team. He's been with the team. He knows the system, having been here last year. He was on the bubble because we never really knew how many tight ends they would keep. Would they keep 4? Would they keep 5? Would they keep 6? We know that Coach Cutter likes using these split tight ends, and we saw several times through the preseason he was lining up 3 tight ends in a particular play. So, Brandon Myers found himself on the bubble because we never knew how many they would actually be keeping. And we also kind of assumed that Danny Vitale was going to be a likely replacement for him, that Danny Vitale was further along further higher up on the depth chart than Brandon Myers was. But turns out Danny Vitale did get cut. And we actually wound up keeping Alan Cross as well over Danny Vitale. Now, I truly believe Cross is trade fodder. He is, he didn't, I don't, this is my gut. This is my sense of it. I don't know this, but I don't know that he actually beat out Danny Vitale. I think it was Danny Vitale was a little bit injured. And so they wanted to keep a healthy Alan Cross on the roster, on the active roster. And they were going to risk putting Danny Vitale onto the practice squad. And of course that risk didn't pay off at first because he did get claimed, but then maybe it has paid off because he is now back on the waiver wire. And if he clears it on Wednesday, I think it is Wednesday at 4, then he could be re-signed back to the Bucs practice squad. Or they could wait and find out exactly what's going on with that shoulder of his and make sure that he gets some healing taking place there. So that's kind of what I think is going. Now, is that right? I mean, is it possible that Cross just beat out Danny Vitale? Sure it is. I don't know. I'm just giving you kind of what my sense of it is there. So the other thing too that I think Alan Cross particularly brings is we're a little stacked at the tight end spot, kind of. He gives us some extra wiggle room within the tight end spot, which means if we have to let somebody go for another position group, say we wanted to bring up a 5th wide receiver or something like that, it gives us a little bit of flexibility. He won't. What I'm saying is, yeah, I think what I'm saying is he won't necessarily be cut for another wide receiver. He could be, or for another tight end. I'm sorry. He won't necessarily be cut just for another tight end. He could be cut because of, for another position altogether. All right. And to round out the offensive line, we are looking at the offensive line. Now we have our starting 5 as I understand it. It's going to be Donovan Smith, Kevin Pamfield, Joe Hawley, Ali Marpet, and D-Dot. That's our starting 5. Of course, we have Evan Smith there to back up the inside of the line and Gosder Sherilis to back up the tackles, to back up the outside of the line, and that will be the 7 that dress for the game day. We did keep 2 more on the active roster, and these again are kind of the unofficial practice squad guys that aren't really going to dress, and it's our draft pick Caleb Benenoch from this year and an undrafted free agent in Leonard Wester. Now, I got to be honest, if it were me, I might look to switch Benenoch with Allen on the practice squad. But even if they don't, this group feels solid to me. It feels like we've got a good 7 to be on the field, to be on the sidelines during games. Plus, we have some other people who are on the active roster, and it's just a matter of not scratching them from the list and letting them dress for the game. To move in there, we've got some guys we're looking to train up and just really protect that investment we have in Jameis. It sounds pretty good. And should J.R. Sweezy come back from the PUP list, we'll see what happens. I don't know if maybe that's Caleb Benenoch getting knocked down. It seems likely that's what would happen. So we'll see. But that group feels really solid. All right, let's jump over to defense. We'll start with the defensive tackles, because I tell you, you look at our entire defensive line, the ends and the tackles all together is like 10, 11 people, which is awesome. So let's break it down. We've got defensive tackles, and we have G-Mac, we've got Clint McDonald, we've got Akeem Spence, and we've got newcomer Devontae Lambert. Now, this may seem short on defensive tackles, and yeah, we could probably stand to draft another good defensive tackle in next year's draft. We could even stand if a great defensive tackle comes available on the market to go after him. But what we have here, I think in these 4 guys, is okay for this year if everyone stays healthy. And another consideration is that it looks like many of our packages on defense this year is going to feature these guys who are listed as defensive ends who are going to slide over to the inside, and really they're going to become, new defensive tackles. So I think there really is more depth at this position than it might seem on the surface. You look at it and you go, well, really it's just Clint McDonald, G-Mac, and Akeem Spence and whoever Devontae Lambert is. That doesn't seem like that's very deep until you add in these other guys who can slide in. And they kind of play this dual role, so we don't have to have two individuals. We can use one person for two spots. So I feel like we're a lot deeper on that position than it might seem at first. So speaking of depth, let's look at a place where we've got tons of people at, and that's our defensive end spot. Of course, we brought Robert Ayers in, and he is making all kinds of splashes throughout the offseason, particularly in his leadership of the defense. We've got Will Golston, who is still there, carryover from last year. We've got our draft pick in Noah Spence, and we've got a guy who was on the practice squad and then made it to the active roster in Jacquez Smith. Those are our main guys right there. Howard Jones made the roster, which was good for him. I mean, and then there's the new guy, Channing Ward, which honestly, I don't know much about him, but I will be watching him from now on. But I suspect I'm not going to be able to watch him from now on because I suspect he's kind of part of that unofficial practice squad too, and maybe some trade fodder for Channing Ward. I don't know how often he dresses and how much we'll get to see out of him, especially now that practices are closed to the media. Not that I'm media and go there, but it is fun seeing those things come out from Greg Allman and some of the other media guys that get out there to those. All right, defensive tackle, defensive end. All right, let's jump back. Let's move into the linebacker spot. Now, there's no surprises really on the main guys that we kept here. We kept, 5 guys for linebackers. We kept Quan Alexander, of course, who's our Mike linebacker. We kept Levante David, who is a captain of the team. And we brought in Darryl Smith as a free agent this year. No surprises there. Now, backing up Darryl Smith, we've got our draft pick, Devontae Bond. So glad to see he make the active roster. And here's the deal. Darryl Smith is backing up Quan Alexander. So we don't need another body taking up a roster spot, such as Luke Rhodes, to back up Quan because Darryl Smith is that backup. If Darryl Smith goes down, we've got Devontae Bond. If Quan goes down, Darryl Smith slides over into Quan's spot as the new Mike linebacker. And then Devontae Bond slides into where Darryl Smith was. So we get a 2-for-1 on those guys, which helps saves us a roster spot. And then we have a Darius Glanton, who is also on the team, who is backing up Levante on the weak side. Now, if you go back and listen to episode number 7, where we had Scott Reynolds from pewterreport.com on the show, he talked about this position and how it was the most concerned for him because the drop-off in talent from the number 1s to the number 2s here at the linebacker spot. He did however, happen to note about a Darius Glanton. I'd asked him the question. I said, who are you most excited for Bucs fans to finally get to see that may not be on their radar? And the person he named was a Darius Glanton. Scott Reynolds did. He said that's the guy that people, he's going to be backing up Levante. Keep an eye on him. But I think that really tells us why Luke Rhodes was cut. I think Luke Rhodes was just superfluous in a system where you only have a limited number of roster spots available, that it was more his position that was expendable and not so much him. And I think that's what we're seeing here. I really do. I think that's why that happened. But I feel good about the linebacking core this year. I feel a whole lot better about it than I did last year. And I think it makes a lot more sense to me. All right, let's jump back to the next line back. We have our cornerbacks. We have, of course, the starting 4, Brent Grimes, Alteron Vernon Hargraves, and Jude Ajay-Barima. No surprises whatsoever, and they were all deserved and all well-earned. Those were some spots that, of course, this was one of our weakest positions last year. And congratulations to Coach Cutter and to Jason Light, who've done fantastic shoring this particular position up. I think the surprises for me in this particular position is the fact that Jonathan Banks is still on this team. And the guy that I thought was competing with Jonathan Banks, which is Josh Robinson, are both still on this roster. And they were kept here. So those were interesting surprises that we wound up keeping 6 cornerbacks in Jonathan Banks and Josh Robinson. Now, I think that Josh Robinson could be trade fodder. Or he could be a backup. He's probably both. He's a legitimate backup until we get the ability to trade for him, or somebody else comes in and we have to release somebody. He would be a guy that we would potentially release, even if it's not another cornerback. I think Banks, on the other hand, I think he is here as 100% trade fodder. Okay, maybe not 100%. Maybe 95% trade fodder. And here's the deal. He was a second-round draft pick a few years ago, and we don't want to just cut him for nothing. We don't want to just lose him, so we're going to keep him. We're going to keep him on the active roster, and I'm wondering if Jason Light's not in the office on the phone trying to find a better spot for him, trying to find a spot to keep him. Now, that 5% of why might he not be trade fodder is simply this. Brent Grimes, Altron Werner, Judah J-Barima, Vernon Hargraves on the actual roster are all listed as guys at 5'10". Every single one of them are listed at 5'10". And Jonathan Banks is listed at being 6'2". Okay, I'm sorry. Judah J-Barima was 5'11". All right, so 5'11", 5'10". Jonathan Banks is 6'2". The thing that Jonathan Banks brings is height. And in a league where we've got some really tall receivers, he's at least somebody who has some height on him. That might be a reason why we would keep him, we'd use him, but I don't know. I think with the quality of cornerbacks that Brent Grimes and Vernon Hargraves are, though, they are certainly not unbeatable. We saw Brent Grimes just get get dealt with. Who was that? Was that Josh Gordon by the Browns? Just a play that Brent Grimes could not overcome the height difference in that particular on that particular play. So I don't know. We'll see. It could go either way. I think it's 95%. We're just not wanting to give up Banks unless we can get like a good draft pick or something out of him. 5%, we're going to keep him around just for his height. But either way, I just don't see us needing six cornerbacks on this roster, which is why I'm saying trade fodder for both of these last two guys. And then rounding out the defense, completing the defense is our safety group, which now currently consists of Chris Conte, Bradley McDougald, and Keith Tandy, who all returned to the team this year from last year. This is pretty much the same group that we had last year, and it was our most abysmal group last year. Oh my gosh, this group was bad. Sorry, guys. Sorry, I'm not trying to dog you. I think it was your coaching situation. But they're in a new coaching situation right now. And I got to tell you, watching these guys in the preseason, I've been very impressed with them. This has been the one that has concerned me the most. And I've been very impressed by what I've seen. And a number of times I was like, Hey, where were you guys last year? Well, what are you doing showing up, from here? The only thing I can say is it's a coaching change. The other thing that we do is we get to add to this draft pick Ryan Smith, who oddly, just to let you know, on the depth chart, on the roster, he is not actually listed as a safety, but just as a defensive back. And that's because he can kind of move back and forth between that cornerback safety role. And so we have those four guys. And here's what I think about this particular group. I think it's a very serviceable group in a year where we really couldn't address the safety position at a high enough draft pick. I think we are still looking for a big-time playmaker in this group, which will probably be addressed in next year's draft or maybe even the year after. Or maybe we've already addressed it in Ryan Smith and he comes in and absolutely explodes on us. I don't know that that's going to be him, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. Is this group going to be able to hold their own, which I think they will. They've looked pretty good so far. And what are we going to do in coming drafts? So that's our offense. That's our defense. Now that is 50 of the initial 53. And we actually have to talk about three more guys. These are our special team specialist people. Of course, it's Roberto Aguayo as our kicker, Brian Anger as our punter, and then Anthony DePaula as our long snapper. And I'll say this, I am still super impressed with DePaula from the Redskins game. He had a wet ball and there was never a bad snap. That just so impresses me. I love having him on this team. It just makes me feel, it makes me feel warm and cuddly. It makes me feel safe and secure knowing that we have a guy who can handle, wet balls. Don't get dirty with me. Don't go dirty on that. Not at all. And he can get them where they need to be. It does look like Adam Humphries is going to be our punt returner, but I don't know. That kick return still seems wide open. I don't know who they're going to go for in that particular deal. I really hope that Dante Dye gets better and comes back and becomes our new kick return, and that he's still just as good as we saw in the preseason, because I thought we had a really good thing going there with him until he got injured. And I just don't see anyone on this team emerging that can return it as good as he did in preseason. And it's just such a shame he got hurt. Such a shame he got hurt. And yeah, I don't know. Oh, that one hurts me. All right, fans. Well, that is the team so far. That's the initial 53. Okay, maybe 54 if you count shorts. Well, I'll tell you this. It's not the final 53. This is who we are rolling with into Atlanta. So overall, I feel pretty good about it. I am reminded in looking at this, though, that this really is Dirk Cutter's first year. Now, I know he was here last year, but this is his first year kind of in the driver's seat. It's his first year in control of things, and you can't fix everything in a year. I think we've addressed some very real needs, and we'll continue to address those needs next year and really each year. We'll continue to address needs that we have. I also note that this is Light's first year without Lovey having a big controlling influence into that. And although, truth be told, I'm not really sure how that affects things that much. I think Light works very much by committee or by group consensus, although he certainly is going to be the tiebreaker. If there's something he feels strongly about, he's going to do it. But overall, I feel like he works in consensus with his team, with his coaches. So I'll tell you something else too, heading into this game in Atlanta. This year feels very much like the team has a chip on its shoulder that we've not seen in a long time. And I'll say this, it's about damn time that they play with a chip on their shoulder. I think that for the first time in a long time, the team actually has hope. I think Dirk Cutter has come in. PewterReport.com had a great article talking about how Cutter has energized the team. And I think that's absolutely right. I think they have hope. And because now that they have hope, they can actually feel that chip on their shoulder a little bit more heavy, and it's motivating them. So I love getting to see that. And I don't know. I feel like that's how they're playing this year in a way that they've never played. There's a sharpness in Gerald McCoy's voice that I've heard, if you listen to him in the interviews, that we've not heard in recent years. So that's what we have there. Of course, guys, coming up on Sunday, we have the Atlanta game. I'll go ahead and give you my game prediction. I hate predictions. You guys know that if you've been listening for more than 2 episodes. I hate predictions, but this might be one I'll do this season just because it's kind of fun. I predict the Bucs win 38-17. That's my prediction. Bucs win 38-17. We'll see if I'm right. Might not be. I don't know. Well, guys, now I want to hear from you. What did you think of the initial 53? What position should we bring someone else in? What do you think? Please, if you're going to comment, do the work of saying who actually needs to be let go in order for that to be made. All right. So if you say we're going to bring this guy in, we're going to bring him in here to this position, then who gets out? Who gets let go so that we can actually make that trade? I'd love to know. If you don't, then I'm going to probably suggest it to you who that's going to be, or tell you why you can't do that, because you're not going to lose anybody. You guys can let me know on Twitter at the Pewtercast, or on Facebook, facebook.com/thepewtercast, or drop me an email to thepewtercast@gmail.com. Well, guys, coming up next on our final segment of the show, Fan to Fan, I've got some stuff I want to talk to you about, Bucs fans. Stay tuned. Hey, Pewtercast fans, Brent Allen here, and I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much for how you've been supporting the show. Whether you've been downloading the show or sharing it with your friends, or you've been commenting on Facebook or on Twitter, or you've sent me an email, the love and support you guys have shown for the show has been outstanding. It has been phenomenal. I've been watching the numbers. I get those reports literally every day. Anytime I pop online and I look at them. And the numbers just continue to climb. They continue to spike. They continue to just, everything's moving up and to the right. And I am so thankful for all of you guys who have really been supporting the show. And I wanted to let you guys know about a new way that you can support the show. You can support us financially, which would really help keep the lights on here, because it does cost a little bit to do this. And one way you can do that, you can leave a one-time donation over at paypal.me/thepewtercast. You can leave a little tip over there for us that'll help us, just help us kind of offset some of the cost of the fees. And hey, listen, if you are interested in becoming an official sponsor of the Pewtercast, I would love to talk to you about that. Just shoot me an email over at thepewtercast@gmail.com, put sponsorship in the subject line, and I'd love to have that conversation with you. Welcome back, Bucs fans. It's time for our final segment of the episode, and this should be fairly familiar to us these days, in a segment that I like to call Fan to Fan. Basically, here's what it is I pick a couple of topics that if you and I were sitting down at a bar having a beer, these would be the kind of things I'd be talking about. You know, just kind of off the cuff, nothing super duper prepared, just a couple of topics I got here. And the first one I want to get to is Mike Glennon. I said we'd be talking about him a little bit later in the show. And here's the thing, Bucs fans. Let me be clear from the very, very beginning. I am not speaking ill of Mike Glennon. I'm not speaking ill of him at all. I like Mike Glennon. I like having Mike Glennon on our team. I want Mike Glennon on our team. Okay? I just think it's time that maybe we start calling Mike Glennon for what he is, which is a really good backup. Maybe he's a super duper fantastic backup. Maybe he's better than any other backup in the entire league. All of that may be true, but he's still just a backup. You know, we keep hearing about how he's, come next year when his contract is up, his rookie contract, he's going to be gone. He's going to go sign with another team that he has a legitimate shot at starting with. And I don't know. I mean, because here's the thing. The problem with that theory is it requires another team to sign him. You know, we've heard all last year, they brought in Ryan Griffin because when Mike Glennon goes, if we get the right offer for Mike Glennon, we'll still have somebody. He's not as good as Mike Glennon, but we'll have somebody. That's why Ryan Griffin's here. That's why he's taking up an entire roster spot. They're not willing to risk him being on the practice squad and getting signed away by some other team. But here's the problem. There's been no market for Mike Glennon. As far as we can tell, nobody's really asking about Mike Glennon. Every time I see one of the media guys ask Jason Light in a press conference, hey, have you taken any calls for Mike Glennon? His answer's been, no, I haven't. He's not taking any calls. So Teddy Bridgewater goes down. Hey, he's out for the season. Tony Romo goes down. He breaks his back. He might be out for the season. Who knows? Maybe not. Maybe he's out for a career. I don't know. Other teams looking for a quarterback out there. Denver Broncos lost their starter and their backup this past offseason. If Mike Glennon is really this quarterback of the future, if Mike Glennon is this starting caliber quarterback, then how come we're not taking any phone calls? And guys, I'm not down on Mike Glennon. I'm really not. I'm not speaking ill of Mike Glennon. I like Mike Glennon. Here's the deal. I think it's just us who've overhyped him. I think it's Light and even Dirk Cutter and Lovie Smith and Greg Schiano who might have overhyped Mike Glennon. And here's the thing. I wouldn't have a problem with any of that, except for the fact that we're using a roster spot to hold on to a third quarterback when we could be using that roster spot for somebody else. And the only reason we're doing it is because Mike Glennon, we're pretty sure, is going to go. And we want to keep this other guy as a backup. Here's all I'm saying, fans. This is all I'm saying. Let's stop buying into the hype that he's this super great guy and that, should something happen to Jameis Winston, boom, he steps in, we've got a starter ready to go, and things are just going to sail. No, if something happens to Jameis Winston, hush your mouth. Nothing needs to happen to him. God forbid something happened to Jameis Winston. We've got Glennon who can come in and be a backup. He can be somebody who gets it done until Jameis comes back. I think that's who we have in Glennon. And I'm not down on him. I'm not down. You guys know I don't get down on players here. I just think that is the deal with Glennon. I think we need to stop overhyping him and stop buying into that. That's who we've got. So that's a little fan to fan for you. Danny Vitale. Let's keep talking about him. That was the cut I hated the most. I really do. Now with this new info that, he comes out of the medical exam with the Bills and they think he has a torn labrum in his shoulder. Okay. You know what? I kind of get it. I think he was bound for the practice squad here in Tampa Bay and he just got claimed, and that's part of the risk. Did he really tear his labrum? I don't know. I saw a video of him today where he's doing bench curls and bench presses and different things like that. So, yeah, I don't know. But I tell you what, I like Danny Vitale's work ethic. He tweeted, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, I'm not going to let this slow me down. I was blindsided by failing the medical exam. I'm going to get back after it. I'm going to get working. Well, you know what, Danny Vitale, good for you. Get to work, son. Do your thing. Keep working. You're doing great. So there's that. Hey, upcoming game, the Falcons. Here's another topic. Man, Falcons are looking rough this year. Oh my gosh. And you know what? I think what's happened is something has infected their locker room. Something that I would call a culture of losing. And I hate to say that for them. I don't. I don't hate saying that at all, because you know what? I think that means this is going to be a glorious game. This is going to be a great way to open up our season, even if it is on the road. And I can't wait, because I'm going to be there. Oh, I can't wait for this game. A couple keys to winning the season. Things that I think we just have to see every game in and out is, I think the offense has to come in for a fast start. They've got to get in. They've got to get a quick score in almost every game. And you watch the games that they have a fast start on will be the games that they dominate. They'll be the games that they control the entire game. They'll be the games we win for sure. The games when they come in and do a quick 3 and out, or maybe they get a quick turnover or something like that. I don't know. Let's see what happens. But I think that's a key to winning. I think that another key is the defense has to stop the run. Specifically, they have to stop the run. Nobody needs to be dashing for over 100 yards in a game against Tampa Bay. They've got to stop the run. Another key is eliminate the penalties. They sure look like they did a great job of that on at the Browns game. And even with the Redskins, there wasn't that many penalties. So keep that up. But the big thing I think that they need to be able to win is they have to be able to recover from bad plays. They have to be able to recover from an error. They can't let the momentum of the entire game shift on a single bad play. That's something that the Bucs have been guilty of in recent years. That's something that they've been guilty of in this preseason, but they've got to shake that off. I'll tell you one more thing, and then we'll get out of here, fan to fan. You're going to know that we're clicking as a team. You know that we're clicking as a defense. You know that you're going to know that we're clicking all together as a team when the defense begins to score. The other day I was watching Warren Sapp Football Life on NFL Now. I think is what they're calling it. John Gruden had come in that year in 2002, and he went to the defense. And he said, hey, if you guys are going to be this really awesome defense, why don't you start scoring some goals too? Why don't you start making some points? And I got to tell you, when you have the offense scoring points and the defense scoring points, you're almost untouchable. So I think you're going to know that things are really starting to click when you see the defense begin to score. We've not seen the defense score a whole lot in recent years. Not at all. And so I'm looking for that. Will it happen this year? I don't know. Maybe. I hope so. But we're a year or two away. I think we'll see that. So, well, Bucs fans, that's going to do it for this episode. And hey, listen, think about it this way. The next time we talk, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, your beloved Bucs, my beloved Bucs, will have officially played their first game of the season. And we here at the Pewtercast will try to kind of start settling in for a routine for the season. Listen, I want to thank everyone who submitted iTunes reviews and got us over that 25 mark, so we now have the instant cast. I was getting kind of worried we weren't going to make it, but you guys did it. And if you've not left a review yet, there's no time like the present. Go for it. Just head over to iTunes. And hey, listen, if you're doing it from your phone especially, and you've already subscribed to the Pewtercast, what you need to do is go over to the little magnifying glass, and you need to click on that and search for the Pewtercast like you're not already subscribed to us, and that's where the reviews will be. Right in there. I've had a few people ask me about that this past week. But go over and do that, and if you want to show support for the show in another way, like in a monetary way to help keep the show running and make sure that we keep the lights on here in the studio, you can make a donation in any amount to paypal.me/thepewtercast. That'll come straight to me. And as always, email, Twitter, Facebook, it's all at the Pewtercast. Talk to me and I'll talk back to you. Well, you know, guys, sometimes in life, you just have to play with a chip on your shoulder. It brings out an edge to you. It brings out a tenacity. It gives you a purpose that's bigger than yourself for doing what you do. And when you find yourself in a situation that you're just kind of going through the motions and you're not really playing with passion, or worse, maybe you're even just kind of letting the hits come as they may and you're not doing anything about it, then perhaps what you really need is to get a chip on your shoulder. Get a little pissed off about something. You know, kind of like Warren Sapp said to Derek Brooks on that fateful day, that shit ends today. Well, guys, I have a question for you. What is your that shit ends today moment? Find it, and you'll find that chip on your shoulder, and you'll find yourself playing better. Guys, until next time, beat them dirty birds and go Bucs.